Welcome to our video tutorial database part 2. My name is Chigomana MD. In this lesson, we are going to look at connecting to a Microsoft Access database programmatically. We are going to query the database using simple SQL statements that the user has no control, meaning that they are built in the program. Let me start by showing you how the application must work. When we run the program for the first time, in other words, when we load the form, we are going to see all the fields with all the record. In other words, there is no filter that has been used. But once we click African, we see only the records where race is equals to African. When you click Indian, you see where race is equals to Indian. When you click colored, you see where race is equals to colored. When you click white, you see where race is equals to white. When you click reset, you go back to how the dataset, the results looked like when you loaded the form. Now, this can better be explained by using the code. Let me go and show you how this must work when we write the code. I'm going to explain this using the form's load event, meaning that everything is going to happen when the form loads. Now, there are 10 steps that you must master in order to master database connection programmatically. The steps are as follows. Line number 14, you have to create a connection object. The second step, you have to create a command object. The third step, you have to create a data table. The fourth step, you have to set a string object. The fifth step, you have to open the connection. Step number 6, you have to initialize the connection. Step number 7, you have to query the database. In other words, that is where you have to tell us what is it that you need from the database. Step number 8, you load the results into a database. In other words, the results that you requested from a database in line number 32, now you have to load them into a data table, which is an imaginary table. Step number 9, you close the connection. In other words, you have requested whatever you want. You don't want to interfere with the actual database or the physical database. Now you are working in memory. In other words, everything from after line number 38 will be done outside the database. Line number 40, you put the data from the table into the data grid view. Now, let me repeat this for the sake of effect. There are 10 steps that you have to master in order to apply, database connection programmatically. Step number 1, you have to create a connection object. Number 2, you have to create a command object. Number 3, you have to create a data table. Number 4, you have to set a string object. Number 5, you have to open the connection. Number 6, you have to initialize the connection. Number 7, you have to query the database. Number 8, you have to load the results into a data table. Number 9, you have to close the connection. Lastly but not least, you have to put the data from the table into the data grid view. Let me explain how these things is happening, creating a connection object. Now, what is actually happening here is that we have a built-in OLDB.OLDB connection. It's a built-in object which is already there in Visual Basics. Now, by default, you cannot use a built-in object as is. In other words, you cannot manipulate a built-in object as is. In order to manipulate it so that you can use it in your program, you have to create a new object. So in this instance, in line number 14, I have created my own object, and this object is called conobj. Listen, you can name it the way you want, but it must be meaningful. Here I have said dim con object so that it can remind me that this is a connection object. You can use your own name, you can use whatever, but the name must be meaningful. It must show that you are a programmer. Line number 17, we are creating a command object. The command object also is a built-in object, which means that we cannot manipulate it as is. In other words, we cannot say oldb.oldb command.whatever. What we have to do, we must make sure that we create an instance of the class. So in this instance, I have created a new object called obj command. You know, I've used the word command so that it can remind me that this is a command object. You can use any other name, but it must be meaningful. Line number 20, we are creating a table object from the class of data.datatable. Now, data.datatable is a built-in object which cannot be manipulated by us users as is. Therefore, we have to create an object. We have to instantiate data.datatable. Now, at this point in time, I have used the word table so that it can remind me that I'm busy with a table. You can use any other name as long as you know that this is a data table and the name must be meaningful. Line number 23, we are setting a string object. Now I want you to concentrate on the left hand side, on the right hand side of the assignment operator. Now here we have two items here. We have a provider, we have a source. These are the two things that we have to know here in line number 23 when it comes to a connection string. In other words, a connection string consists of the provider. It also consists of the source. Now, what is this provider? A provider is like a driver. A provider is like a driver that helps us to connect to a database. There are many drivers out there, but at this point in time, we will concentrate on Microsoft.jet.oldb.4.0. Why? Because our database is in the form of MDB. Now, MDB database are databases that were there before 2007. So if you were using databases, let's say, for example, from 2007 until present time, you are going to use Microsoft.ace.oldb.12.0. Now, what is this data source? Now, the data source is the actual path where your database is. Let me show you how this is happening. From this from C to desktop, that is the actual location of the database. Now the last part, mdb sample underscore 1.mdb, that is the actual name, that is the actual name of the database. Now how can you see Uri where your database is located? You just check, just behind the name of the database there is desktop. In other words, the first place where you have to locate or to look to search for your database, you must go to the desktop. The next statement, you open the connection. Now that you have declared the connection object, the command object, you have created a data table, you have set a string object, now you open the connection. Now once you open the connection, it means you have to start working on that connection and try to get whatever you want. Right, initialize the connection. In other words, the connection that we made in line number 23, connection object dot connection string. Now we are assigning it to obj command dot connection so that we can start working. In other words, the connection that we created in line number 23 now is being assigned to the obj command's connection property. Line number 32, we are starting to ask questions from the database. In this instance, we are asking all the fields from a table called val people. Good people, I'm not going to dwell much on the SQL because what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a sort of an ebook that you can refer to so that you can learn how you can try and query a database by using SQL statements. Now, the property that you use from the command when you are using SQL statements is the command text. Now, another thing that you must note here, your SQL statement must be inside quotes and must be in a straight line. Let me repeat that for the sake of effect. Your SQL statement must be inside quote and it must be in a straight line. Line number 35. In line number 35, we are loading the results into a database. Isn't it that in line number 32, we tried to ask a question from a database? Now, in memory, we have the results. So, in order for us to work better, we must make sure that we load the results into a table, into a data table that we created in line number 20. Now, we use the method table.load, and inside brackets, we have obj command.execute reader. Now, let me say something here. When you are using the simple select statement, the method of the object command that you use is execute reader. You use execute reader. But if you were busy with insert, update, delete, create, you were going to use those things. Perhaps I must say, they are not queries. They are not queries. So the method that you are going to use, you are going to use obj command dot execute none query. Why none query? Because insert, delete, update, create are not queries. And another thing that you must remember, if you use insert, update, create, delete, you don't have to use table.load. Line number 38, you close the connection. In other words, now that you have got what you want, you no longer want to work, you no longer have to work straight inside the database. You have to close the database. Right. Now it means everything after line number 38, everything is going to happen just in memory. Now, what is it that we are going to do in line number 41? We're going to put the data from the table into the data grid view. Now, a point of note here. Now, my data grid view here is data grid view 1. In other words, this is the name of the data grid view. Now, especially in an exam, if you are not the one who designed the application, maybe the examiner has included the data grid view with the application. Just go to the form, try to check the name of the data grid view. Now, the property that we are going to use for assigning the content of the information that we got in line number 35 is data source. In other words, we are going to say whatever we got in line number 35, we are going to assign them into data grid view 1 through the data source method or the data source property. Now, this line number 11 up to line number 43 has given you a picture of what exactly must happen when you connect to a database. In other words, you create a connection object. You must create a command object. You must create a data table. You must set a string object. You must open the connection. You must initialize the connection. You must query the database. You must load the results into a data table. You must close the connection, put the data from the table into the data grid view. Dear students, I appeal to you to make sure that you understand this. You must understand them, and then perhaps if it will help you, you memorize all the steps. Now let me show you because I was busy with Form 1 slot event. Perhaps I have to show you all those other events, like the African event, the Indian event, etc. I want you to check this line, the one where we query the database. This time we are saying select all from val people where race is equals to African. It means now we have changed something. We still want everything, but now we are specific. That is where race is equals to African. Let us go and check this one for Indian. Now even this one, we're being specific, race is equals to Indian. That is basically what I wanted to explain to you. I hope you understood the lesson. Thank you for this time.